Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I'm back with another emergency card kit. I know, 2 days in a row, but this one coordinates with the Spellbinders Club kits for April 2024. We're going to go through the kit and then we'll make 3 cards today, and later in the month I will have another video with 4 more cards. Let's take a look at the kit. So these sentiments coordinate with the Spellbinders Clubs for April 2024. There is a heavy sewing theme through that. So there's a lot of that, but then there's also some additional sentiments for cards where I was stretching those kits beyond sewing just to see what we could do. So we have circle sentiments. Here's to finding our sanity, one stitch at a time. You're so amazing. A quilt is a hug you can keep. Just a reminder to floss daily. Happy birthday to my favorite sociopath. Thank you so much. It's not hoarding if it's yarn. May your bobbin always be full. These 4 sentiments here are repeating the top 4, but then there are 4 new ones in the bottom right. Knit happens. Hello, jalapeno. When life hands you lemons, grab the tequila. Squeeze the day. So you can get that with the circle around it, which I like to help me center my sentiments, but it's also available without that circle, the same size sentiments, but there's a bunch of Spellbinders dies that fit these really, really well if you want to switch it up and not use a circle. Then we have our rectangular sentiments, and there are 2 extra spaces on here, so we repeated 2 additional sentiments, but otherwise nothing new. Then we have our strip sentiments, and I've done a bunch of new things here, and I would love your feedback. So I know you're not sewing with a full bobbin, so much fabric, so little time. And those are additions to the sentiments we had in the circle sentiments. Those come in 4 different fonts. Then we have sub-sentiments to go with the small die of the month. Although many of these are super common and you might have word dies already in your stash that you can use with these. So there's a hello, and you can have hello sociopath. Hello, you're so amazing. Let's get stabby. Knit nerd. Can I get a hoop hoop? Hello, Peño. There's a thanks. So thanks so much. I am so blessed. There's a you. Are so amazing, are so very kind, are so beautiful, happy for you. So there's like 3 different words and you can spell that out. And there's a so very you can put in front of it. So it'll be so very happy for you. And then you can use just the happy, beyond measure, birthday, or crafting a happy hello. So I did that in 3 fonts. It was going to be like a whole nother page to add the 4th font. So let me know if we do something like this in the future. Are these the 3 fonts you'll use the most? Do we want the scripty font in there instead of a different one? I'm very curious. Then you all have been asking for this for a while. I took some of those sub-sentiments and I made them bigger. Typically our sentiments are about 1/4 inch. These are 3/8 of an inch. So you can mat them on a 1/2 inch strip of cardstock. I fit as much as I could on here. Again, I was trying not to carry these onto 2 pages. I want to conserve your paper, let you get the most out of that. Then these are brand new. These are reverse sentiments. So we have a black background and white lettering, and your tick marks are in white, so you'll separate them the same way you did before. We have all of the same sentiments that we had on the original strip sentiments from earlier in the kit. Okay, now here's the thing. If you don't have a great printer, you might have a hard time getting a really dark black background. That's okay. You can choose to print just the other pages, right? You don't have to print these, or you can take it to a UPS store or a FedEx Kinko's and ask them to print it for you, and be picky. If they print it and it doesn't look great, tell them that. Ask them to print it again. Tell them you're not paying for the ones that didn't come out well. You're asking them to do it, and so they're supposed to do a good job. I have a laser printer, and I have found that in my settings, I want to tell it that it's printing on a transparency, because then it moves through my printer much more slowly and I get better ink coverage. But if you have a printer with better settings, like I don't even have a cardstock option, which is sort of pathetic. But you do, like if you put a really heavyweight cardstock as what it's printing on, that might work too. I'm printing on 80-pound hammer mill extra smooth cardstock. And so you have all of your strip sentiments and then these slightly bigger ones as well. This is the second month that I've created sentiments for the Spellbinders kits. I would love to know if you would like me to continue doing this, if you find that you're using them or inspired by them. I always want to try to find a way to make them work for more than just those Spellbinders kits. And so far, I feel like that's true. There's tons of other companies and stamps and dies and things that go along with a sewing or knitting theme. And so hopefully you can use this with supplies you already have. If you have been enjoying the emergency kits, or if you're new here and you think this sounds awesome, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new free printable. Let's dig into our first card. So this is the large die of the month. It has all kinds of sewing pieces and then this jar. The jar is exactly 5.5 inches tall, so it'll fit in an A2 envelope. And then this is the 3D embossing folder of the month. And I'm gonna try something here that didn't work this time, but that's user error. And so I'll show you what I mucked up and then I'll show you how I fixed it, but maybe try this. So I am using my Delicata silver ink on the bumpy side of my folder, and I'm running it through my die cut machine just like I normally would, and you can see it depressed that ink into those spaces, but some of the places I didn't cover with ink very well. So I tried to add another layer and just, it was off, right? And so the backside didn't look great, but that's okay. I just flipped it over and I will go over the bumpy side of the paper with that same silver ink. So now it looks like I have silver needles and some silver thread, which is super awesome. Then I am going to make a 5x7 card for this one. I just think it gives this jar a little more room to groove, but you certainly can make an A2 with it. I am adding on the silver jar top, and then this is a pin cushion on the very top. I'm not going to put any pins in it, but I think it's really cute. You can also chop that pin cushion piece off because the silver piece will cover even if it's not a great cut. And you can turn it into all kinds of things. In my video later in the month, I'm going to turn it into a jar of lemonade. You could also use the techniques from my lemonade card to turn it into a shaker. There are some deep cuts that show sort of the edge of the jar. Those cut all the way through. So it takes very little work to use your scissors and trim out the rest of that. The scissors. These are gorgeous. Like, I love them so much, and I know I will use them independent of the other sewing pieces from this die set. Here's the thing, I'm arranging everything in my jar. The scissors fit, I know they fit. I've seen inspiration cards, and yet I didn't like my scissors in the jar. It's okay. I arranged all the other pieces, and then I'm laying my sticky mat right into the corner of that blue piece of cardstock. And at this point, I realized I hadn't yet glued down my jar. But the sticky mat's gonna hold all of those pieces in place and make it really easy for me to add glue and place them exactly where I want them. So I'm gonna add my jar to this blue piece. It's 4x6, so it's an inch smaller than my 5x7 card. And then I'm going to start adding glue just in the places where the die cuts are overlapping to kind of glue them to each other. Then I'm going to check my placement because the jar has moved slightly from where it was when I picked up my pieces. I don't want anything hanging out the bottom or hanging too far down. Once I figure that out, I'll add little dots of glue all over. Normally, I would then place the mat right back in that bottom left-hand corner, but I'm going to end up moving it up ever so slightly to make it fit a little bit better. But I am lining it up with the edge of that blue cardstock. I'm going to press everything firmly and then I'm going to give it a minute. Okay, it looks like 2 seconds here, but actually it was probably a minute and a half because I have a newish mat. I've only used it a couple of times and it's really sticky. So I need to give my glue time to grab before I try to remove that mat. To begin assembling my card, I'm going to add my background panel with my embossing to a 5x7 card base. All right, so it's 10 inches by 7 inches, and then I scored it on the long side at 5 inches and I fold it in half. I'm just pressing all over the back, trying to make sure I get really good adhesion there. These 3D embossing folders give you so much texture, but sometimes that can mean you really need to make sure it's adhered well, or you're going to have a little bit of buckling. I use my 2-inch foam tape. That's right, that puppy is 2 inches. And it's really easy to cover a large panel. I'll just remove the backing paper. And then I brought in a piece of white cardstock just to give me more contrast as I try to get that centered. To add a label to my jar, I'm using the mirrored arch labels, and it's perfect. Like, it looks like it was made for this die set. So I cut the larger die out of some gold mirror cardstock, and then you can see me moving the smaller one around at the bottom. Some of the sentiments, like "You're so amazing," fit beautifully in that smaller one. Some of them fit better in the slightly larger one. Play around with any nesting dies you have. This kit is the 30th kit I've released. There are tons and tons of sentiments for you to play with. All I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. That's it. Other than that, they're completely free. So there's lots and lots of ways to use them. I added a little bit of foam behind my label and added it to the center of my jar. And then because I couldn't let these scissors go, I just couldn't. I'm going to add a little bit of glue and then glue them down on the inside of my card. And that'll be a nice, elegant, fancy surprise when I give this card away. I often forget the insides of my cards, so this made me really happy. For card number 2, we're going to use a lot of those same pieces, but we're going to make an A2 card. We're also going to bring in the small die of the month. I think this is the win of the clubs. It is so versatile with all of those word dies. Then I'm going to use the Be Bold Blooms, and I already have a bunch of them cut. I love that guy so much. I have 2 sets, so I can cut more of them more quickly. I'm also using this previous 3D embossing folder, and I'm going to mess up the name. It's like the Efflorescent Flora 3D embossing folder. And I wanted to show you this new one just came out. It's called the Luxe Backdrop and Border, and the top is a different pattern, but the bottom is the exact same pattern, and there's a die that will cut a fancy edge for you. It goes right in the embossing folder, so it's really easy to get that lined up. I am so excited to play with that one. I'm adding my panel of shimmer embossed cardstock onto my A2 card base, and then this piece is 1 inch smaller. It's 4.5 by 3 1/4. And I have just set that on top of my card because I wasn't sure at this point how much I wanted to trim off or if I was going to trim things off. I'm arranging my flowers sort of around the perimeter, but so that they hang off of the rectangle. And then I'm going to take the hello from the small die of the month and add that to the center. So I'm adding glue to the back of a white one. I love the stitched detail on these and the size of them. Like, Spellbinders doesn't often have large word dies like this that are super versatile. I'm in love with this set. When I went to add the black hello, I glued it slightly down and to the right to give me a drop shadow. Then I'm going to put my sticky mat in the bottom left-hand corner. This time I know that things aren't attached, right? And then I'm going to pick everything up. I'm also going to take this moment to add a little bit of shimmer cardstock to that white rectangle. It just felt a little bit flat. I didn't cut the shimmer cardstock correctly. It's a little bit big. Don't you worry. I majored in English, but I know how to fix things, you know? Then I'm going to lay my sticky mat upside down on top of my card base. When I'm adding glue, I don't want to add glue where it's going to be overhanging the edge. And so this is a great way for me to be able to visualize that even 1/2 inch margin that will be all over the card. I'm taking some mint tape and adding that rectangle onto my card base centered so that I can get those flowers on there exactly where I want them. I didn't trust me to center that just on top of the sticky mat. And then I will set it aside for a little while and peel off my mat. I didn't wait quite long enough. You can see me having to make sure nothing moves. I also haven't glued down the hello yet because I wasn't quite sure where I wanted that positioned. At first I trimmed off just a little bit of the stems of these flowers with the really skinny pieces, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to cut them pretty close. I either trimmed them at the base of the flower or just right along the edge of that white rectangle. You'll have to let me know what you think. I was really torn about the best way to do that. Then, because I'm an over-adheser, I put circle foam dots all over the place. and I'll add that to my card. I'm going to use one of the reverse sub-sentiments for this card, and I am trimming it out so I can see the tick marks on both sides of the paper. Then when I run it through my trimmer, I just put those tick marks right on the cutting blade, and I know I'll get it straight. This one says, hello, jalapeno, and I'm going to take a black marker. This is an Ohuhu alcohol marker, and just color along the edges. So now it looks like it was white printed on black instead of black printed on white. I have a couple more strips of black cardstock. They're about 1/4 inch, just like the sentiment, and I'm going to stack those up behind it. When I'm using these 1/4 inch sentiment strips, I prefer to either mat them on a 3/8 inch strip of cardstock or to stack them up and give them a little bit of thickness. It makes them look and feel a bit more intentional. And I like that. It's just a little element of polish that I love. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to, right? Totally up to you. So I'm going to center that hello, kind of like where I had it originally. And then I'm going to add plenty of wet glue behind that jalapeno because it is going over top of a flower. And so there's some texture in there. I noticed I had some little hairs on my dies, and so I grabbed a stiff bristled brush and I'm just brushing that vigorously over my die cuts once the glue has set. Then I'll add some shimmer pen and that will finish up card number 2. I really think that that small die of the month is so versatile because it will work with so many other sets you may already have. For card number 3, we're going to use the stencil of the month. This is a fairly new club. It started in December, and typically you get 5 stencils. Sometimes it's 5 stencils that stand alone. Sometimes you'll have 2 of the stencils that layer together and others that stand alone. This month we get 5 layering stencils that all stack up together. I'm not going to show you this entire process because there's a lot of repetition, but here's what I learned. Number 1, use a bigger brush. I don't know why I pulled the smallest blending brush I have to try to do this. There's a lot of space in between these pieces of floss, or skeins of floss. Am I right, you guys? I don't do things with sewing because I'm really bad at it. But use a bigger brush for that base coat, and then you can bring the smaller brush in to add some depth, okay? So I'm just bringing that darker color up from where they are tied together, right? They wrap that sort of paper around it to keep them all together. Then I'm wiping the ink off with a dry towel and I'm switching to a new spot each time. I don't want blue ink in the yellow. And then I'm going to bring in a fine liner pen. I prefer my stencils with a stamp, right? An outline stamp. Not everybody does. You certainly don't have to, but this gives me that same look and feel. If you don't have a fancy fine liner, I don't know that mine is fancy, but if you don't have a fine liner, check and see if you have a small Sharpie. That would work too. I actually think I would have liked a slightly thicker line on these that looked more like a stamped line, but that's okay. The second stencil is almost identical to the first. It's just the other 3 skeins of floss, okay? Again, I'm going around them with a pen. I've added the darkness right where they're wrapped around with paper, and then I'll bring in the next layer. You get 1 stencil for all 6 here, but that's where a smaller blending brush really comes in handy. Plus, with these long open areas, you really want to go in the direction of the openings on the stencils so that you don't accidentally bend or move something. I'm moving pretty quickly through this because, again, it's sort of repetitive. The colors for this layer are the same as the darker colors I added on stencils 1 and 2. This next stencil is the black layer of paper. Well, it's black for me. And I'm coming in with my VersaFine Onyx Black pigment ink. And actually, as I was doing this, I was worrying because over top of the stencil, it almost looks brown. And I was like, oh no, I am not starting over. I'm also being really careful. I am pressing down with my fingers to make sure that that stencil isn't going to gap. I'm not going to get any ink underneath the stencil. And then when I pull it away, it is perfect and such a deep, dark black. And I love that. For the final layer, you get an accent color on that original piece that wraps around the floss, okay? I've decided to do mine in Gold Rush. There's 2 colors of gold lunar paste, and this is the one that's sort of a vintagey gold. Again, I'm pressing down on the stencil here. It's a really large stencil, and I don't want any of that lunar paste seeping underneath my stencil. And so if I press it flat, I'm more likely to get a clean result. And look at that. You guys, I was so proud of myself. I'm usually in too much of a rush to like do it right and have it turn out that well. So I was super pleased. I trimmed it down ever so slightly, okay? It's about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my A2 black panel that will be in the background. And then these two white pieces of cardstock are 4 by 5 1/4. I wanted to pop this up just a little bit, but after all that work, I wasn't willing to risk foam tape and then it might end up crooked. So I just add a little bit of cardstock shims and that's gonna do it for me. It will also let me use wet glue so I have that wiggle room. It's a 1/16 of an inch border all the way around. And so chances of me getting it right the first time, like with foam tape, very slim. Then I'm gonna use Happy Hello, and I'm gonna stack these up again. I'm starting by adding that hello, the black one, down and to the right, just to create that little bit of drop shadow. But I tell you what, this is a pretty busy background. It's bright and colorful and I love it a lot, but I just feel like the sentiment was getting lost a little bit. And so I'm gonna show you what I ended up doing. I have a drop shadow behind that hello, right? It's down and to the right again, and I'm doing the same thing to the happy. I'm making sure I have nice contrast. That's that white piece of cardstock behind there, just to make sure I get the drop shadow even on both words. And then I'm gonna add another one up and to the left. There are not shadow dies in this set, but you can create something that looks pretty close, right? And actually, I kind of like the look. It's like a funky shadow behind it. And so that will also help this sentiment to stand out on the background. Plus, I started spinning that card base and trying to decide like, where's it going to stand out best? Where's it going to look the best? But look at that. Isn't that fun? Ultimately, I decided to put this at an angle so it wasn't parallel with the floss, right? When everything is going the same direction, they sort of blend into each other. So this worked pretty well for me. And I will add those with my wet glue. That gives me just a little bit of time to wiggle. I do want the happy and hello to look like they're parallel to each other. Once we get the word dies on there, we can add one of our sub-sentiments once again. I like the reverse sentiments for this because they're going to stand out a little bit better against that busy background. And I cut out a whole bunch of them when I was making our last card. So this is really quick to trim out, and then I'll just use my black marker once again to go along the edges and kind of cover up the white cardstock that's peeking out there. Then when I stack it up, I'm going to put black cardstock behind it so it all kind of feels like one chipboard piece. Again, you don't have to stack things up. You don't have to create a drop shadow if you don't want, right? If I had used more muted tones in the floss, that would have worked too. Definitely keep in mind that even though this kit has a sewing theme and the clubs have a sewing theme, you don't have to use them together. There are lots of options and ways that you could mix and match this with other companies' products as well. But friends, that finishes up card number 3. I would love to know which of these 3 cards is your favorite. And if you're interested in the free printable, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. And if you ring that bell, you'll be notified every time there's a new free kit. It's the first and third Friday of every month, but lately I've been introducing bonus kits at other random times of the month, and you definitely don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.